Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 69 of the Dynasty Junkies podcast. Nice. We've got a great guest lined up this week. It's myself, Andrew Hall, and my co-host this week, Scott Sidlow. How you doing this afternoon or this evening, Scott? How you doing?
I am doing well. I am still tired. I still have this little baby crying all the time, and fun times with that. So shout out to all the parents out there.
Nice.
It's fun times.
Good.
But hey, talking about my favorite thing in the world, and also a pretty special, awesome guest tonight. So very excited for that.
Yeah, this week we've got Brandon Marianne Lee from The Athletic joining us tonight. Brandon, how are you this evening?
Hello. I'm good. I'm so excited to be here and to talk Dynasty. I haven't done a Dynasty show this season yet, so this will be fun.
I was going to ask you that, and kind of maybe we start with that. I know you're obviously I would say a seasoned veteran is the easiest way I can put that. You've been doing fantasy for a while. You know what you're talking about. But Dynasty is a little bit of like a game within a game, right? It's a little bit of a longer version. It's a different kind of version of fantasy. So it does take a little bit of thought and everything. That's why I'm a big fan of Dynasty. Once I got in, I was like, I'm never going back. This is my kind of style. But what's your story with Dynasty? I guess when did you start playing? How many years you've been in it? And kind of what are your thoughts on it in general?
So I started playing fantasy football in general in 2008. And I started playing Dynasty. I don't think it was until like 2015. And I'm in one league now. I had to give up two other ones when I was on break. And the one league that I maintained actually was started by the late and incredibly great Mr. Mike Tagliere. So, yeah. So he started this Dynasty League when he and I were working together and on a podcast together for Pro Football Focus.
Yes.
And so, yeah. And we were friends, and, he asked a bunch of people to join, and I was one of them, and that was great. So that's the one that I'm still in. And yeah, it is a true commitment, which is why when I couldn't commit, I didn't want to like mess up all my league mates. And I know that's probably a hot topic for Dynasty, right? I mean, I think we all have a lot of people in there that are messing things up. And so I guess my one thing is like, I'm someone who's almost painfully self-aware. So I just knew, I was like, I don't want to be that person. So
my logic is always, if you can't do it all the way, don't do it, right? Like I think we've all been in leagues with people that are just not setting lineups and not doing waivers. And it's like, listen, I don't mind if you're busy. That's fine. We all have lives. If it's too much, let's find someone else. That's always the way to do it. And I never feel bad about leaving a league. You know what I mean? Like if I can't do it, I'm helping everybody out. It's better for everybody. So no hard feelings there.
And I had to do that. I mean, because like there was a while, I think, especially when you're in the industry, a lot of people don't understand this. They're like, post your records, post it. Listen, half the time these leagues are things I had to do for an article. And like I did a certain draft strategy to try it out and talk about in some article. And then I'm just playing catch up the whole time. Now, I really do I always set my lineups. That I don't ever not do.
Oh, yeah.
Right. However, some waiver wires, some Tuesdays, some leagues get more attention than others. And there's just no getting around it. If you are in 15 plus leagues, you cannot dedicate 5 hours every Tuesday to this. You just can't, especially when you're working in the industry, because you're also writing Tuesday articles. Yep. You're running around doing all this stuff. Like what do you think is going on here? Who do you think does all this stuff for you?
Scott, how many leagues are you in, Scott?
Yeah, so Brandon, I'm a portfolio Dynasty player. So I have 40 plus Dynasty leagues. I used to be in, a dozen redraft leagues and things like that, but I've really cut back on redraft. I think I'm in three redraft, and technically I think 2 are keepers. So I'm in a lot of Dynasty leagues, and I know exactly what you mean, because I basically would have to do it full time if I wanted to run through waivers on every league and do all that. So yeah, it's, pick and choose a little bit. And obviously we'll get into this actually later in the show, but some of my teams are going to get more attention now as we get kind of into the meat of the season. Right. So yeah, I totally get it. And, sometimes it's just better to, like you said, be all in or just step out of the way and let somebody else be involved. 'Cause it's not fun for you either if you can't, if you're not keeping up and you're missing out, and then you're like, oh, I could have picked up that player, I should have been doing this, or I didn't make that trade, or so yeah, you got to enjoy it too. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, and I don't think I've had a single commissioner say, "How dare you leave this league?" It's almost always like, "Thanks for letting me know. We'll find someone and you move on." You know what I mean? Like,
yes,
it ends up being better for the league too. So yeah, I don't think there's ever a problem. And I know we were briefly before the show, we were talking about pandemic babies. I feel like there were a lot of pandemic leagues, right? There were a lot of people that joined a bunch of leagues because we were just bored inside. And after the draft, dynasty league startups were going nuts. And I do think that we saw some of those get dropped this year, but I think we're going to see even more as we go forward. There's going to be a lot more orphans and safe leagues and things like that. But again, that's okay. That's fine. And we're going to be here to walk you through all of that, right? Part of the Junkies, what we like to do is talk about kind of the immediate stuff, what's going on now, try to help our teams win. And then we try to zoom out a little bit and see what we can do to help our listeners and try to feel ways to find trades or feel like what's the next thing we should be looking for. Let's keep our eyes on the long term. So with that in mind, actually, let's kind of get into a little bit of week 7. I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but I do want to kind of get at least a little bit because Dynasty becomes redraft in a way, right? When you build all these teams, you get all these trades, you still got to set the lineup. You still got to go win that week. You got to win your matchup. Dynasty becomes week to week, which can be a grind and it can be a slog and it can be waivers are tough and all that. I get it, but at the same time, we got to keep focusing, got to keep grinding. That's the only way you win, right? The one thing I tell people all the time, how do you get better at this? Just keep trying. Don't give up, right? And if you're in a league that you're not interested in, see the season out, finish the year, and then abandon your team after, right? Like say, I can't do this don't quit in week 7, right? Even if you're out of it, in Dynasty, you're never out of it. And that's what we'll kind of get into a little bit later. But I guess maybe, Scott, let's start with you. What's your one big takeaway from week 7? If you could look back on this one specific week, what stands out to you when you think back?
What stands out, and the only thing that comes to mind is brutal.
Yeah.
Brutal. I know we're always, every year I feel like we have this conversation. Oh, this is the worst year ever for injuries or what, like we seem to say that every year, but I don't know. I'm telling you, there were lineups where I had no one to start. I mean, you talk about, I had maybe 6 starting quarterbacks week 6, and by week 7, through injuries and buys, I had none. I couldn't start a single quarterback in a super flex league, and I just had 6 of them, and it's like, I cannot remember a single week like that in quite some time. So yeah, it was a brutal week, and I kind of honestly, I just expected to lose every league, and I was like, not even worried about it. I was like, I'm going to set my best lineups. I'll just let it ride. And if I win anywhere, I'm just going to be stoked that, hey, I got the win. And there were some that were like, I won like 90-60, where the average score is normally like, 180, right? Yeah. But the other team was just that much worse off than me. So,
well, that's what I was going to say, actually, because everybody had this, right? Everybody was suffering. So it was kind of like, it was a weird, like a apocalyptic view of fantasy. You know what I mean? Like, it's what it would happen if we were only down to, like, instead of 32 teams, if there were only 26. This is what it would feel like, like we should have been in 10-team leagues. This is 12 is too many. What are we doing? So, but I think too, though, there was, I think, 2 leagues where I was in where I had no points on my bench. Where like literally I started the only options I could and my bench was zeros. I'm like, well, at least I made the right choices, right? That helps. I don't have to think too much about who am I starting this week. Oh, it's clear. Let's move on to the next league, right? That kind of makes it nice. So yeah, that's a good takeaway. Brandon, does that ring true for you, or do you have something else you take away from week 7?
Yeah, no, I mean, I had actually a pretty good week. Because I made the right choices and other people did too, and I still was a little bit better. I also found that I don't have as many studs on the teams that were all on bye than I thought I did, and then I was like, oh, are these teams bad? But no, I'm in like 4th place, so I'm not that bad. So I guess it's okay. I feel like there are a couple things that I took away from week 7. I think one is, if I have Justin Fields, I'm shopping him for the people that still believe in him.
Yeah.
And there are people in leagues, may or may not. And so but I think I'm always in a win now mode, and there's 0% chance that you're going to win now with Justin Fields. So if you're in win now, this is the time to sell him.
Somebody on this podcast might have mentioned that previously. I'm just gonna throw that out there. Go ahead.
Yeah, that would be you, Scott. We know.
Yeah,
he's a Michigan fan too, so that makes it even better.
Yeah, I just feel like I think this is rough, and especially if you're in a 1 quarterback league. I don't think it's enough of a benefit to have him. Period. And I
You mean like
know.
as in on a bench? Like why even roster him, right? Something like that?
I mean, I'm just saying, like, if I can get things for him now, I don't think even if he does well next year, I'd feel bad about it in a
That's a good
one
way to put
quarterback
it.
league. I just
Yeah.
wouldn't.
I agree.
So
Yeah.
who cares? So get
Yeah.
something now and win now. And like we were saying, like a lot of people did these orphan leagues and stuff. There's no guarantee that your league's going to be there next year. I know that sounds terrible, but whenever people are like, "Oh, I'm going to build because I can win in like 2025," you have no idea if this league's here in 2025 or if you can be in this league in
Great
2025
point.
because of your
Yep.
life. So win now, especially if you're in the middle to upper. This is the time to make the moves, and I feel like that's the thing. Also, I think there might be a possible buy low, very small window on Marquise Brown because everyone's into Rashad Bateman right now.
That's a good point. Yep.
So I would
Okay.
maybe test that water a little bit and look at other teams too, where people are really into this one player, like he's amazing, and then like no one else cares. And then also my favorite move right now is to buy all the old people if you need to win.
Yes. Yes.
Go through the rankings, the dynasty rankings, compare to real life, and see who has a massive disconnect because of their age, and you sweep them up.
My favorite thing to do is to go and if I'm in either the middle or the top, like you were saying, if I'm trying to contend, I love going and looking at my my league and seeing who's 1-6, who's 2-5, and do they have Melvin Gordon? Do they have Emmanuel Sanders? Do they have Zach Ertz? These players that are kind of like you don't really want them in Dynasty, and those guys are at the bottom of your standings. They're not going to want them, so you can get rid of for a third round pick or something. You can get some of these guys to add points to your team, and we talk about it on this a lot. I know it comes up all the time in Dynasty, but trade value versus production value is something we always talk about. And I just wrote an article for Fantasy Pros that talked about that too, where production value sometimes gets overlooked in Dynasty, where we need points to win this thing. Dynasty assets are fun, and it's nice to have a player who's going to be good in a year, or I want those 2023 picks. Everybody's scrambling to get these 20. I gladly give up my 2023 picks to win a championship right now. I would much rather have a championship than have a chance at Bijan Robinson. You can have that guy. Give me the titles. I don't care. Like the titles are all I'm looking for.
That's
And
right. I don't need to
be
the one with the most picks. Like that doesn't usually that means I've done something terribly wrong. I'm one of those people that like there's been years where I had like 2 picks period in the draft.
Yep.
And I was like, that's fine. I won last year. So
Right.
I don't think that we talk about it. I think Cordero Patterson's another one too. I think you can buy him really, really low now because he's old and he underproduced last week. So this might be your moment. And I do think with those state of running backs right now, he's going to continue to be effective for points in your dynasty teams.
Yeah,
And I think that's important.
There's a lot of teams I think right now that are in the middle. I think with week 7, you still got a little bit of the, 10 teams feel like they have a chance, right? You probably still have, it's not like it's week 12 and there's really only the 6 that are making the playoffs. You've got a lot of time to make some moves still. You've got some bye weeks that just happened, obviously, that might have had a down week or two, right? Players, my guys are coming off a bye, I'm ready to turn it around. So there's still a lot of market out there. And I think, too, each league is its own market. And I think that's something I would take away from week 7 is like, we'll take this as even if you won or lost, it really doesn't matter. Week 7 was such a weird, like you can't look at it as I lost and I'm out, right? Like you can't take that from it, but there are going to be teams that will. There are going to be teams in your league that are now 3 and 4 thinking, well, might as well blow it all up and start over. And it's like, you're definitely allowed to do that, but I don't know if every league needs to worry about that. And I think I heard this on the Athletic podcast. You were talking about it, Brandon. We're like, I could be in 7th place, but be 3rd in scoring. I'd much rather look at scoring. Like, how is my team actually performing? Because it's not late enough where 7th matters. You know what I mean? There's plenty of time to make that up.
I'm in 3 leagues like that where I'm in the top 3 for points. Some of them number 1, and I'm in 7th place. For some reason, 7th place is like my like place in these like.
I love 7th place right now, though. 7th place is great. I'll live there right now.
About ready to take off, and it's fine. Exactly. I feel fine about it. I'm not going to freak out. But also because I'm lower, sometimes I can get actually better trades because people don't think I'm necessarily trying to compete all
Good
that
point.
much. And so they're not as suspicious. Whereas if you're towards the top and you're like, hey, I want your best player, they're like, you know,
Yeah,
so yeah.
Well, and also you're trading with your competition in these leagues, right? You're not trading with an unknown market. These are players that are giving you, or other players, other fantasy players that are giving you NFL players to help your team. And so if you're seen as a contender, sometimes you have people that go, no, I'm not trading you that because I'm fighting against you. But if you're 7th, 8th place and you're 3 and 4 and they're like, oh, you're not a threat, I'll trade with you. And you're like, sucker, I just got your best player. You know what I mean? Like you just helped me out a ton. Yeah, that's the way to do it. I love it. And I think we can kind of even use that as our takeaway for the first half, which I kind of wanted to talk about, but it sounds like it's all kind of right here. The first half of the season has been a little chaotic, right? We've talked about it already. It's been a little wild. We've had some bye weeks, obviously, have already come through. We've only got 2 on bye this week, and it kind of stretches out into week 14. I think technically we still have byes. So we've got a long stretch of weeks with byes, but the big week is over. Right, the big hurdle is over. We're not going to have another bye-apocalypse, as far as we know. You know, barring some sort of COVID cancellation or something. Which again, knock on wood, we're not going to deal with that this year. But point is, we are through the heart of most of those painful weeks with the injuries and who's starting, who's not. I think that's what I'm taking away from the first half is we kind of know who players are. Right, we know who's going to be. Like it's not Javonte season like we thought it was going to be. Melvin Gordon is still clearly entrenched. It's also not Trey Sermon season. You know what I mean? Like Trey Sermon is not doing anything this year. So, and that's probably not going to change. So through 7 weeks, you kind of have an idea of what's going on. Scott, I guess, were you saying Javonte is going to be the guy? Do you think Gordon's gone still? I think they run Gordon into the ground at this point.
I called this at the beginning of the season. I was like, it's Melvin Gordon's season. He's DeMarco Murray, and I'm sorry. That doesn't mean that Derrick Henry wasn't going to become Derrick Henry, but it did mean DeMarco Murray was there.
He was in the way that year.
The first year was tragic, and everyone was like, but Derrick Henry's amazing. And I was like, I know. We all agree. It doesn't matter. He's not getting enough time. Yeah. And like, if you look at the snap counts, they're actually going back down again for Javonte Williams. I'm not saying that makes sense.
It did reverse the last few weeks.
But that's what's going on.
It doesn't need to make sense, right? Was it the fallacy of rational coaching, right? We always think that coaches are smart and doing the right thing. That's not always true. But again, I mean, there's a whole bunch of narratives you can weave for whatever kind of argument you want when it comes to these guys. You know, like why not run Melvin Gordon into the ground and save Javonte's legs? It's like, well, maybe Javonte could use the experience and he's good at pass pro, so why not leave him in there every down? Like, you can go build whatever narrative you want, and that especially comes true in trade talks, right? If you're saying Melvin Gordon, I want to go get Melvin Gordon, well, then you hype the heck out of Javonte Williams. You go, man, Javonte's going to take over any minute. You know that. I'll give you a third from Melvin Gordon. You can get out of that. You don't have to worry about it. You know what I mean? Like, there's all that kind of stuff. That's the mental game within the game within the game. You know what I mean? It's all part of the fun.
And the problem with Dynasty is that I need to overpay for Javonte Williams, and I can get Melvin Gordon for free.
Right.
So that's the problem. And
that's what it comes down to.
And is Melvin Gordon going to be useful next year? Absolutely not. But again, if I just need points this year, this is what I'm talking about. Like where you can be like, okay, you know what? I'm going to go for the guy that's free. And he's just going to get thrown in for like nothing. And I can at least have someone on my team who's going to be scoring double-digit points every week.
Yeah.
And, you know, with Javonte Williams, you're buying him for the future. And I don't have a problem with that. But I just think that is the reality, like you were saying. Like it did not come to fruition in the way that we thought it would. And when I watched the game, it's the eye test is that Melvin Gordon's fine.
It doesn't look that bad to me either. I'm right there with you.
Yeah. There are other teams that would love to have that. So I don't think he's that bad. And I think that the Broncos feel the same way. And I don't know. I mean, I'm a Broncos fan, born and raised in Colorado. So I also know that the team is not good. We were, what do they say, punching above our class or whatever for a long time. We had a good record, and I was like, this is not a good team. So, and the coaching is not good, which is why I'm also not shocked about the Melvin Gordon thing.
Well, but that also explains why Javonte might be even better next year, right? Maybe the coaches change. Maybe there's some changing that has to occur to turn that team around. And again, we were talking about Fields earlier. I think this is kind of why I'm one of those people you were talking about in a league where I'm rebuilding, where I'm 0-7 and I have no chance of anything this year. As an orphan, I just took over and my team is terrible. I'm trying to accrue picks and try to get something that's a little more stable, but I am going after guys like Justin Fields, right? Like somebody who this is the dip. And I do think that there may be a couple more weeks of this, which could even lower his price further. You know, I just put a poll out on Twitter today that was saying, which would you rather have, a 2023 first or Justin Fields in Superflex? It was overwhelmingly Justin Fields. And I'm like, That blows my mind because there's so many people that are just done with him and want to get. I'm like, so I'm not alone, right? I think Justin Fields still has some value, and something else about the picks, and I say this all the time. I love trading those picks away 2 years because I can go get them back, right? People always think, well, I've traded it and it's gone. Oh, that's the last trade you're ever going to make. I doubt it. You know what I mean? Like you can go get another one. Go just keep trading until you're done. You know, that's what 18 months from now we have to worry about those picks. I got time. I'm not worried about it.
I'm concerned about Justin Fields' awareness / lack thereof.
Well, there are a whole bunch of red flags on that offense right now, and I think I attribute a lot of it to Nagy myself and them not preparing him correctly and not doing the things in the locker room or in the meeting rooms, or whatever you want to call it, in the video room, where they're not teaching him the stuff he needs to learn to be a good quarterback at this stage. And I think that's where it's going to get burned, and the coaches are going to go. Fields is going to stay, and they're going to get a better coach that teaches him next year. And I think that's going to help him. And that's why I think he's going to have an okay future, because he's too talented, in my opinion. He's too talented to be a one-year bust and out. He's not a Josh Rosen, right? I don't see that for him. He's got some foot talent. He can run around. I think there's still some potential, but that coaching staff is just killing him right now. And I think the sooner they get rid of Nagy, the better chances for Fields. But I mean, again, it is scary. It is a risk. I mean, I'm not going to lie. There is still you're definitely taking a calculated risk if you're getting Fields on your dynasty team right now. Like, you got to really hope and pray that there's some turnaround coming. Another guy on that same kind of page is, I mean, to kind of change the subject a little though, and we don't have to get into the other stuff, but Desean Watson, right? Is he going to go somewhere in the next week? Is he going to be on a team in Miami or Carolina or somewhere? Is he going to be making some actual fantasy production this year? I don't think so either. I think he stays.
No, because you can't take the PR hit and give up the amount of assets it's going to take. And for a guy who may never play, you can't take that risk. I mean, there's a few organizations that are questionable enough to maybe do it, but I would strongly bet against it. I don't see it happening without any clarity. I would be
shocked. Yeah,
I don't know how they can still ask for 3 firsts. That is just shocking to me. And we play Dynasty, so it's shocking that they think that that's a possibility. What I will say about the cases, because I think this is important, is that the only way he could start getting to a point where I would even remotely consider it is if he changed his tune on settling. Because that's the only way that these criminal charges will go away. This is important though, right? So I'm not even going to go into anything else. The criminal charges you can't settle, right? But if people refuse to come forward in the criminal case because they settled before that, then they don't have enough evidence to bring the criminal case to trial. If there is no settling and they are able to bring a criminal case, I just think at a certain point, once there's 2 cases going on here, then NFL is going to have to step in. Right.
I agree.
There's no way that that's not going to happen. So unless I hear from his attorney or Desean Watson that he has changed his tune on that, because he was very clear that he is not going to settle, then it's too high of a risk for me personally, regardless of anything else. And I would think it'd be too much of a risk for any other team. So unless behind the doors, that's the only way this is happening, is if behind closed doors, he's saying, okay, fine, I'm going to settle. I'm going to get this done. We're going to da-da-da. That's the only way this happens.
I completely agree. And I think too, that it's just, I think this is one of those cases of it doesn't really matter what the answer is. Not having an answer is the reason nothing is happening. Yeah. If we knew he was suspended for a year, let's say that a year from now, this is all done. The criminal cases are done. And Goodell comes out and says he's suspended for a full year, 1 calendar year from today. Right now, then teams can look at that and say, okay, now I can assess his value. Where are we going to be in a year? What do we want to give up for that? The fact that it could be 0 or a year, that's too wide of a range, in my opinion, for any team to take a real risk on. You're not going to send 3 first-round picks for a player that might not play for you for a whole year and could tank your entire reputation in your town. Like, that's just too much risk. There's just too much. Chance. And I don't think he plays another snap for Houston either. So, like, I don't know what happens here. And I think that's what everybody's just waiting on the answer, whatever it is, before they make a decision, I think.
Well, this is especially true because all of these owners are trying to rely on taxpayers for their new stadiums.
Yep.
Right. So if you take that kind of PR hit, it actually hurts you financially. It's very directly.
Care about.
Absolutely. So if you all of a sudden have legislators that say absolutely not, you're a corrupt organization because of X, Y, and Z, then it's playing with your money. So I agree with you. I think it's just too much. And I think that from a dynasty perspective, if someone loves Desean Watson and you got him sitting on your bench all year, again, shop him, hear them out. If you can get something just in case it's nothing, that's still better. Like, I really think that. And again, this is also about, is it super flex or one quarterback?
Right. One quarterback I'm avoiding, like Justin Fields. Like, there's just no point in even having him on my bench. There's no value, even if he comes back and whenever that is. I probably have a better quarterback anyway. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not that desperate for a quarterback in one QB. In Superflex, I do think it's similar to Justin Fields too, though. He's somebody I'm kind of targeting on a low ball offer and trying to see what the floor I can get. If it's something like even like a 2023 first, like I was saying for Fields, I might send that for Watson to be like, it's 2 years out. He's playing by then anyway. Definitely. He's probably for Superflex. Maybe that's worth doing, right? But then the guy that has Watson, the manager that has Watson, is that enough for them to get rid of it? Because it's like, well, he could be a top 5 quarterback in Dynasty in 2 years. Like, that'd be worth more than the first. I mean, it's because, again, we in Dynasty don't know any more than anyone else. And I think, too, that the thing that we've learned, I think, this year more than any is that values are very different across the board for a lot of fantasy players. You know, some people are fine taking risks and love taking risks and trade all the time. Others are more of the hoarding type. They take a player and they never touch it. They never move it. They just let it go because they're in so many leagues they can't focus on trades anyway. I mean, like, we're seeing all across the board a whole bunch of things. I've got some leagues where it's real active, some where it's none at all. So, I mean, again, each market being so unique and so different. I mean, in 40 leagues, Scott, you're, as a portfolio player, you're seeing all sorts of information that I don't even see. You know, you're probably seeing a whole bunch of different trades that I would be astounded to see in some of my leagues where there's no movement for weeks. You know what I mean? We've had 3 trades in one of my leagues. In one Dynasty league, 3 trades. That's it for the whole year. And I was involved in 2 of them. Like, that's insane. You know what I mean? Like, it just, because I'm like, come on, guys, let's do something. Let's do something. Because I'm a junkie. That's what I do. But it's like, that's the whole point. Is like, I just want to keep I put it in my veins. But anyway, so let's kind of go forward a little bit using some of this week 7 talk and kind of talking about some of this. I do want to get into some of the injuries. We're not really a news show. This isn't what we're supposed to be, but we do like to talk about it because a lot of this can change the value of players in Dynasty. And kind of what you were saying before too, Brandon, it can provide opportunities to buy older players or to buy backups for cheap. Maybe you're looking at a championship run and you're one piece away, or you had a guy that got hurt and now you need a QB or you need a tight end. So let's start looking at some of these injuries. I put a lot of them on the show sheet. We don't have to talk about each one, but maybe, Brandon, which quarterback this week, I guess, is the biggest injury concern for you? And I've got a few listed, but which one do you want to talk about? I guess, which one stands out?
Well, I think that Tua surprisingly looked really good. I don't know why everyone hates him. I feel like people really disrespect him.
It's because he's a lefty.
Is that
maybe?
Maybe. So that probably is the one that I'm most excited about on this list. I will say that Zach Wilson, hear me out here.
I want to talk about this.
If you're in a 2 quarterback lead, the best thing that happened is Joe Flacco coming to that team because they needed veteran leadership to help him in the film room. More than anything else, this is a massive step in his development as a quarterback. Excellent and point. For all of the other pieces around him, he has just been overwhelmed, and the coaching staff did him 0 favors in helping him learn the NFL. When you watched him, he actually has some good elements here. I don't think he's like a lost cause at all. He's on the Jets, so poor thing, right? But I don't think that this is a bust situation, but we needed to change things up. So I actually think the Joe Flacco insertion, more than the injury though, is what's going to help him. I think he needs a break. He's gotten sacked crazy amounts of times. Let's give this guy a break. Let him be in the film room with a guy who's been in the National Football League for a long time, has a high football IQ, and get him on the right track. So I think you could still get him low, especially because he's injured. And I think there's a possibility that this is a major step in the right direction for a turnaround.
I completely agree. Yeah. And I mean, Scott, what are your thoughts on Zach Wilson? Is that kind of hitting true for you too?
It's 100% agree. Could not agree more. Yes. And I mean, the biggest thing too, that offense you need to run the ball in that offense. It's all it's play action, it's rollouts. That's what they do. That's how the passing game develops. It works off the running game, and they can't run the ball right now. So when he drops back to pass, he's just getting, I mean, everybody knows when they're passing, right? And so he's getting annihilated. The line's in rough shape. And so, yeah, I mean, a combination of things there. I thought I know initially they had talked about like having Josh McCown as the quarterback's coach there, and he would be around and help mentor and things like that. And so, yeah, he's not playing, but at least that's somebody who's played recently. He's a great mentor. And so now Flacco can kind of come in and be that role. And I mean, he knows why he's there. And I know in the past, Flacco said, he's not a mentor or whatever. He doesn't need to be, honestly. Just sit in the room with him, listen to the questions he asked, what's he looking at on film, just things like that. He will gain so much knowledge from that. So that's the best point that could be made, Brandon.
Yeah, just by osmosis, right? Just being in the room and being able to ask Joe Flacco questions or hear how Joe Flacco breaks down on a defense and kind of, those little things are just going to matter a lot. And I think too that you hit on the nail on the head there too, Brandon, that this is the partially anyway, the start of the dip on Zach Wilson. I think that coming into the year, he was probably a top 3 quarterback in Superflex, and like everybody was giving him all this, attention. And the new Jets offense, they got Elijah Moore, they got Michael Carter, like they got a whole bunch of new weapons. Denzel Mims is going to break out, and then it just came out flat. Right. The whole thing just didn't work, and the whole offense hasn't looked good. And I think I was shocked that they didn't say he was out because his back was killing him from trying to carry the team. You know what I mean? Like, this is ridiculous. And I think too, if he takes a couple weeks off, let Mike White go in there and take some sacks for a couple weeks. Let Zach get healthy. They're not going anywhere this year.
Earn that backup QB money.
Mm-hmm. Hey, you held that clipboard. Let's see if you learned anything from it.
You get 2 games to have to earn it. Sorry.
But see, also, this could be good for Mike White to kind of do an audition in a way, right? Like, there are a bunch of teams that need backup QBs, and the Jets just got Flacco. They don't need 3. Maybe they can trade something for him after this game. You never know, right?
Do a little Matt Flynn action.
Oh, man, that would be hilarious. But no, I'm looking at it more like Zach Wilson in Dynasty. You're exactly right. This injury provides a window for you to try to see what the price is. Let's go take a look. In Superflex, I would really say Superflex only. I'm not going to really go shopping for him in 1 QB. I don't think it's necessary, but he might be a throw-in in a 1 QB league, right? You could get him added to your bench for nothing if you've got some aging players. Let's say you got, I don't know, like Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers are on your only 2 quarterbacks. I would have no problem at all adding Zach Wilson in a throw-in on a different deal to add some youth to your bench, something like that. I don't think he's got top 12 QB upside, at least for fantasy, at least not right now. But in 2 QB or Superflex, where you need that second or third or fourth quarterback to get through buys, heck yeah, that's the window. And I think it just opened, and I don't think it's going to close for a couple weeks because he's going to be out. So it could be a time to just check now, but don't force a trade. Wait a week. You know what I mean? See what happens. See what that manager needs. If they're without Zach Wilson, maybe they need a QB. Maybe you got Geno Smith. Maybe you got Jimmy G. Maybe you got some of these other like short-term type quarterbacks. You can get a trade done with one of them and a pick for Wilson. That seems like a boost. You know what I mean? Like, get through the whole thing. So yeah, definitely agree with you on the Zach Wilson talk. Let's kind of pivot into running backs a little bit. Unless anyone has another QB they want to bring up. Scott, do you have any QBs you want to talk about? I'm fine with Zach Wilson and Tua. Those are 2 terrific picks. And the other guys are annoying, like Ben Roethlisberger. I don't want to talk about that guy. Running back, though, there were some different running back issues that we saw come up this week. The one that I really wanted to talk about, I guess, the most was Miles Sanders. What are we doing with Miles Sanders in Dynasty? He was kind of an RB1 and then an RB2, and then he's kind of a flex. And he's not droppable, my God. But what are we doing with this guy? I don't know what I have him on, I think, 2 teams, and nobody wants him. I don't know. What are your thoughts on Miles Sanders, Brandon? Do you think he's someone that we should be holding on to, or is it worth maybe moving for whatever you can get at this point?
It's so interesting. I took 2 seasons off trying to get pregnant and then literally being pregnant. And so things were very weird for me. And during that time, I was listening to content, which really actually when I was working, I never listened to content, which was part of the reason why I always had different takes. I had no idea what anyone else was doing because I was exhausted and I was working so much. I was like, oh, whoops. And then I'd go on to shows and everyone was on some guy and I'd be like, what? Ew. And then people would be like, wait, no, everyone in the industry loves this guy. I was like, oh, heck no. And I'd list all the reasons why I didn't like them. I think that's Miles Sanders for me.
That's Miles Sanders?
I have been off of Miles Sanders for a long time. And again, it almost has nothing to do with him, but I am a usage snob. Okay? If you're the Philadelphia Eagles, it's not good enough. Okay, I'm gonna just put that out there. If you were running back for the Philadelphia Eagles, you are not good enough to be an RB1 in my life. So I know everyone else thought this is Miles Sanders' year. This is it. This is what it's gonna be. It's a usage issue. You guys, we gotta absorb what's going on in real life. And could things change? Maybe, but I think now I don't want to say like he's out of practice of being like that kind of volume dude, but I don't know if we know if he could be a volume guy. I don't think we've seen that. So I can't base anything off of that. And you're right. I think that it's just hard to sell him right now too, because I think there's just everyone's kind of sick of him and they look at his game log and they're just terrified, and they should be.
Well, his floor is 0, right? Like his floor, he literally could get 2 carries for 3 yards, and that's it. We saw it a couple weeks ago. Man.
Actually, it's more like 2 for 14.
But you see,
the average is like 7 yards a carry. They just don't give him the ball.
But that's where I'm at with this. It's usage. It all comes back. It could be 2 yards or 2 carries. It doesn't matter how many yards. Even if you get 60 yards on 2 carries, I'm not starting you. Like you're only getting 2 carries. I don't care what your average is. You're not getting usage. Like, yeah. And I think that's part of what it is. There's nobody buying him. There's nobody that trusts him. Nobody trusts him.
Well, here's
the
a
other
trade.
problem with the Eagles is Jalen Hurts, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of people, probably me included, I think most people are worried he's going to lose his job.
Yeah.
So we don't know what this offense looks like rest of season, period, let alone Miles Sanders, right? So he's his own issue. But then there's the whole Philadelphia Eagles. We just have no idea what's going on here. And Jalen Hurts is the Blake Bortles of fantasy sports right now.
Yes,
and by the way, I won many a championship with Blake Bortles. People do not remember that man scored fantasy points, especially at the end of the season. I don't know what the deal was. Mwah, beautiful.
Garbage king. Yep.
Beautiful. He is the OG to the Jalen Hurts. So I feel like that's the problem too with Miles Sanders, and why I probably would just stay, because I don't think you're going to get anything, because everyone feels this. Because if you watch a football game, you're terrified. You look at the box score and you're like, whoa, Jalen Hurts scored 25 points again. I'm amazing. And all those Jalen Hurts people, if they watched the game, are like backing him up as well as they can right now because they're terrified. So I think that's part of it too. I think Miles Sanders has a little bit of Jalen Hurts stank on him.
Eagles
now
in general, yeah.
If Gardner Minshew takes over, not that he has a whole lot of power. Okay, he's a backup quarterback. It is what it is. James Robinson did really well with Gardner Minshew. So I don't think this is like the end of the world. And by the way, James Robinson did well with all the other quarterbacks that were going on with the Jaguars too. So I don't want to act like this is a whole thing, but I think there's a possibility that it gets a little bit better. If Miles Sanders ever has a good game, you sell him that second. But I don't know if it's going to happen.
I don't either.
In the DLF Trade Finder, here's one for you, Brandon. You'll love this. Miles Sanders straight up for Marquise Hallmark Brown. Look at that. Is that beautiful or what? See, if I could get Brown right now for Sanders, that's a done deal.
That shocks me. Is this updated?
October 23rd.
Okay.
5 days ago. 5 days ago.
Oh, yeah. Smash except on the Brown side there. For sure. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Okay.
So
because
apparently there are still
Fuller,
believers out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Remember beautiful Fuller with Desean Watson, when he would just like, all he just needed was those bombs, and it was like clockwork. He was like a video game. It was beautiful. That's Marquise Brown now, right? So even though people are like, oh, well, I'm worried it's Rashad Bateman, I'm like, nah, it's a specific thing that they do, and it's fine. He and Lamar have a thing. That's what they're going to do. And then Bateman's doing all the other stuff, and that's great. That would be amazing.
I would love to get Marquise Brown for Miles Sanders. That would be terrific.
Yeah,
I'm just thinking, like, man, I gotta send that trade. Sounds way too good to be true.
Like, and for someone who doesn't even like Brown, I mean, clearly I call him Hallmark Brown because he's not Hollywood. But yeah, I mean that's hey, you never know, right? You never know, and that's that may have been Miles Sanders' brother, you know, for all we know. I mean,
well, maybe it was a salary cap league or something, right? Maybe there's another angle we just don't know about.
It was a safe leagues super flex tight end premium, so I do know that.
Okay. Well, someone needed a running back real bad. Maybe that's the way to put it.
Right.
I mean, I was just listening to your podcast this week on The Athletic, Brandon, where you guys were talking about running backs are going for obscene values just because they're so hard to come by. And I know that was mostly a redraft discussion, but that same thing applies in Dynasty. We're seeing a lot of running backs go down with injuries in Dynasty. These long-term assets, J.K. Dobbins, Cam Akers, all before the season. We've had injuries to all these different running backs. Maybe that's the answer to why that happened, is that some team just had no running backs and they had a plethora of wide receivers and they were like, I got to make a move and this is the best I can get. I mean, that sounds crazy, but I mean, we've seen crazier things. You know what I mean? Like some of this stuff is all market dependent too. So I don't know. Maybe that's the reason.
Yeah, I just feel like it's because some people listening to this are just starting their leagues.
Yes.
Right. And if you just did a new startup, okay, you may have incredible wide receivers, like a redraft right now, right? So I have leagues where I have 5 wide receivers that are top 25 and I can't start them all. And so that's what we were talking about, is that I'm trying to trade away Terry McLaurin in some of these leagues because I don't even start him.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because he's inconsistent and he has the worst quarterback out of all my people, right? So I hit on a lot of the people like Pittman and Hollywood Brown or like whoever else. And I'm like, well,
Mike Williams is blowing up this year.
Mike Williams. I've got a lot of these people that, even like people I picked up, and I just, so I'm like, listen, I think I'd be okay. I would be okay if I traded him away, even for like a middling running back, just so that I can get some points. Cause some of them I've got like Mike Davis and stuff going because I really, I got like one of them, I did Christian McCaffrey and then I really waited on running backs. So I got Darrell Henderson and Damian Harris, which was great, but I also got Mike Davis. Well, Christian McCaffrey's not there. And now I got these 2 dudes that are like,
right.
Damian Harris like hits or doesn't.
Yeah.
In one of my dynasty leagues, I was pretty much out of it last year and I traded for Christian McCaffrey. I traded Derrick Henry for Christian McCaffrey, thinking the wheels are going to fall off Henry and McCaffrey will be back next year. And I had Barkley on the team already. So my 3 running backs are going to be, Todd Gurley, Christian McCaffrey, and Saquon Barkley. And this last week, I started Mark Ingram, Dearness Johnson, and Mike Davis. You know what I mean? I'm like, what am I doing? Because it's a start 3 running back league. And I'm just like, I was so primed to win this. And it's a whole different world now, right? Because running backs are just almost, not to say a dime a dozen, but they're just getting hurt left and right. And receivers, we just really haven't seen that. Yeah, there are some guys that are, do not practice or limited, and we'll kind of get into that here. But I mean, for the most part, receivers have been, your later guys are blowing up. The earlier guys aren't hurt as much. We're not seeing Devontae Adams tonight, but we haven't seen like a big season-ending injury to anybody but Juju, and I don't even know if he counts as a big receiver anymore.
And it's not even season-ending. He's coming back this week.
Well, Juju could come back in a couple weeks.
Well, not Juju. Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm thinking, Jerry Judy. I just Judy, literally blacked out.
Judy. Yeah.
Is Judy coming back this
week?
I think
so.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, but so that's kind of what I mean. Like we haven't seen any of those massive injuries to the receiving group. So that means there's a lot of receivers that have a potential. And I think that's part of what it comes into. But the one injury I did want to talk about in the receiving group, or I guess the one team, would be the Browns. We saw him last week with Landry coming back and Beckham not being Beckham. What are we doing with Beckham in Dynasty? I feel like he's drastically undervalued, but is he maybe overvalued and just terrible? I guess, Scott, where are you at with Beckham? I know you're not necessarily a big fan, but is it someone you're holding? Are you selling? Are you buying? What are you thinking about with Landry?
The reason I'm not a big fan is because I can't do anything with him for 2 years now.
Yeah.
It's been 2 years. I can't get anything for him anywhere. It's mind blowing. Like he's literally worth nothing. I cannot get anything for him. So it's been frustrating. The thing is, he's actually looked pretty decent this year. He's getting open, and Baker is not getting him the ball for whatever reason. Now, obviously, he's pretty banged up right now. But even before he was, I guess the shoulder thing's been a couple weeks, but OBJ was open. He was running his routes. He was doing his thing. I think he still has it, but for whatever reason, if it's the offense, the connection with Baker, I'm not really sure. So I don't know. It looks like Baker might, honestly, I still don't think he even knows at this point. He might shut it down for the season. He might try to play through it. I don't know what's going to happen, but I think Case Keenum is enough of, he knows the offense well enough. Remember, he had that great year in Minnesota with Stefanski, right? And as long as they still have the great running game, just the only thing you can do with OBJ is hold him for the next few weeks and see if Keenum can come up with some magic, and then get out, trade him for however you can. I mean, honestly, even if I'm a contender, I'm still trading him because I have not been able to for 2 years. I've never seen anything like it for him to go from being like the 101 in non-superflex startups to a few years later untradeable. I mean, obviously there are situations where we've seen running backs like Gurley injury issues, right? And I mean, that's different. We understand. But OBJ, yeah, he's been injured, but when he's been healthy and out there, he still looks good. He still looks like the crazy athlete that he is.
Are you targeting him in trades? Are you going out and looking for him though? Like to
no, because him? I just know that I can't do anything with him. So and honestly, I think people aren't going to give him up for a second, right? So if they're not, then I'm not going to pay more than that. So I mean, that's kind of where we're at. He's one of those just mind-boggling players that just, wow, you can't do anything with him. So I don't want anything. I'm staying as far away as possible. I think I have 2 share. I actually have a 3rd share because I got him as a throw-in. He was a throw-in on a trade. I'm not talking like some, I mean, he was a throw-in, like he no value. Essentially, I traded my like 111 or 110. This was before the rookie draft even. So this was obviously, 6 months ago, probably. And I got like Darnold, Gaskin, and OBJ. And I mean, really, it was just for Darnold. I was like, I'll throw a late first and get myself a starting quarterback in Superflex, and Gaskin, whatever, I could use a running back who can't, right? And then literally he's like, I'll throw in OBJ. And I was like, I don't want it. I mean,
I'll take it if you keep OBJ. I'll take it if you keep him. I don't want him. Yeah.
Honestly, he's wasting away on my bench. He's like my wide receiver 9. Like I.
Well, is that where you're at, Brandon? Are you kind of done with OBJ? You just had enough?
Yeah, I think what but I think that again, like you said, I think it's not it's a weird thing because it's like not necessarily him. And the injuries, and it's a lot. But I think the Browns are just a run first team. They're one of the very few run first teams that are left. That's how they're built. It just is not built to feature OBJ whatsoever. So I don't think that's going to get any better. And that's also why I like Dearness Johnson this week too, because as long as Kareem Hunt's out, I think they're going to be rotating. There are just so many carries to go around. I'm actually starting him and you go to all these like, sites or whatever, and they're like, do not start this guy. And I'm like, I still think he's going to get usage, especially since it's Nick Chubb's first week back. What is going on with everybody here? But it's just such a run heavy team, especially if Case Keenum's out there. They're going to keep definitely focusing on that. What you can hope though, is that, there'll be a couple lucky bombs. DK Metcalf player, people that have him on the team are like, yes, I know what you're talking about. I just need one. I just need one big play. It'd be nice if that started with Case Keenum, because you're right, it's not happening with Baker, and it's just weird. So I'm just not targeting him at all.
I have really high hopes with Landry out, thinking like, okay, they're going to funnel it to OBJ, and that didn't really happen. It didn't. I mean, again, they just ran the ball more to the point where both of their running backs broke down. Like they would rather hurt Chubb and Hunt. They would rather wear those guys down and give them more carries than throw the ball to OBJ, who, like Scott was saying, was open on some of those plays. And maybe that's Baker decision making. Maybe it's in the coaches. They're telling him like, hey, like I think it was last year, right? Where like, don't force him the ball, and like he was trying too hard, and like there might just be some mental aspect to this. But yeah, it's nasty right now. OBJ is a tough one because I think I've had to start him in a couple leagues. Last week especially, I know during Apocalypse, I had to throw him in a couple places, and I was like, just gritting my teeth like, oh God, just get something, man. He got like 4 points. I'm like, better than 0. You know what I mean? Like at least he did something. So
I do want to say I have a dislocation problem in my shoulders. So I have had my shoulder dislocate. I don't even know how many times, 15 times maybe, both sides. I have just bad joints. It's sad. So does my dad. Actually, my dad played college ball, which is how we all got involved. He played at the University of Colorado with Papa Hasselbeck. Yeah, that's right.
Nice.
Tim Emmett Hasselbeck's father. But yeah, so
Awesome.
he actually, it's cool too because his shoulders look at it, but he had surgery that had like massive like Frankenstein scars, because they didn't do microscopic anything in the 70s. So it was woof. And my dad's like, take care of your shoulders or you'll look like this. And I was just like, oh my gosh. But when your shoulder dislocates, the chance of it dislocating a second time quickly is very, very high. There was almost a for sure chance he was going to do that. And I cannot believe that the medical staff didn't put their foot down. I understand that it wasn't the throwing shoulder. That's not the point. The point is that if he lands on it, he's screwed. That's how shoulder injuries work. So I knew that this was going to happen and it was upsetting. So I think that the problem is that once you dislocate it a second time, you're now loosening those ligaments.
Mm-hmm.
He will get surgery in the off season no matter what. I'm almost going to guarantee that to try to do something here. Although sometimes it doesn't work, frankly. But I think we're belittling the injury a little bit more than we should because it's non-throwing arm. Because the problem is if he lands on it, he is just going to keep doing more and more damage that could become permanent depending on a third or fourth dislocation. So I am not a doctor. This is just my personal experience of literally dislocating my shoulder all the time. And the doctor's what they tell me. So I have never had surgery because I'm not an athlete, but I'm sure they're going to try to do something to try to tighten everything up so that this doesn't continue happening. It's really about just landing on it. And there's no way to avoid that.
You got to use that other shoulder sometimes to get open and to make moves before the catch. I mean, like, it's not like you're not using it. You're playing a contact sport. You know what I mean? Like every
well,
down
he's in a contract year too, so that's the tough part, right? Because he's like, I gotta earn my next contract, and
that's kind of where I was going to go with this next, and kind of take that topic in a different direction and say, well, what do we think he's going to do next year? Is he going to go back to the Browns? Do they really want him or need him? I don't think so. Where does he go? What team is going to? I mean, does he go to somewhere like Green Bay, who's playing right now? Like, do they need somebody like this to distract the defense? I mean, what kind of value does he have on another team? It's so tough. And you were saying that there, Brandon, like he's already done this shoulder injury a couple times. It's not going to go away. It doesn't get better over time. It gets worse. No. And I don't think he's going to go back to that wide receiver one overall kind of value, right? I mean, at some point you have to have players, that sort of, for lack of a better term, that die on your roster. I think that's kind of where OBJ is headed. Like we were saying it before, nobody's really giving you what you want for him. And by the time you're willing to let him go, the price has gone down. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, okay, well, now I can't even get that for him. Like, I can't get a second for him in a year. Who knows? So
that's what Cam Newton did on one of my rosters.
Oh, same here. Yeah, that was a brutal day when they announced he was not starting and he was getting cut. I was like, well, there goes those three teams. Like, okay, great. And Gurley did that to me in a couple too. And, I'm still holding him in one league just by principle. I'm just like, you never know. No, it's over. But football's a brutal sport, right? It's a contact sport. It's not something that everybody can do forever. And there is a lifespan. And I think we see it a lot of times. We say that wide receivers have a longer lifespan. Not all of them. I mean, there are definitely some that get hurt and can't do this and shouldn't do this, and maybe that's where OBJ is getting. And who knows, maybe he retires after this year, pulls an Andrew Luck. Who knows? I hate to say it, but we don't know that. But let's get off of injuries. I think we've done a good job on that. I think we've covered that enough. I do want to talk about some Dynasty stuff before we get into our Find Me a Trade. We've kind of talked about it a little bit already, and we hit on it earlier, but I just want to make sure that we kind of hammer this point home. What to do if you're in the middle, right? And we talk about this all the time. Through the first couple of weeks, it's tough to really call yourself in the middle if you're 2-2. You know what I mean? Like, that's just, there's not enough of a season. But after 7 weeks, you kind of have an idea. And I'm not even saying standings wise. I'm saying scoring wise. If you're sixth in scoring, right? If your team is just not quite there, or maybe you've made some bad start-sit decisions. But like, what do you do if you're in the middle? Do you cave in and just say, screw it, I'm going for the rebuild? Or do you try to trade your picks and go in for contention? And I know, Brandon, you're only in the one Dynasty League right now, but you've been in this game for a while. What do you tend to do if you're in that middle spot? Which way do you prefer?
I rarely am in the middle.
Well, there it is. There's the answer. The
I mean,
humble
I'm
brag
gonna
of
be
all
honest with
humble
you,
brags.
I kind of am like an all or nothing person. I just
Yeah.
really feel like I don't have any interest in being third place in a league. It's just not enjoyable for me. So it doesn't happen a whole lot. But at this point, yes, I make decisions and I'm almost always in win now. Again, because I just have the mentality of I have no idea A, if this dynasty is going to stay, B, if I'm going to stay, C, if the other people are going to stay,
Right.
and then also, we can try to build these teams as much as possible, but then, something happens to Cam Akers and you know what I'm saying? Like these things happen. So I can't ever guarantee that next year, if I have 5 first round picks, things are going to be great.
Well, and I think you're exactly right. And I'm of the same mindset. Like if everyone is zigging, I want to zag. And so I feel like you kind of have to feel the league out. And if you're in the middle and a lot of the league is kind of maybe even 4-3 and their team's not great. And you look at that, yeah, they're third in scoring, but they've gotten lucky or they've had some injuries or what have you, and they're not going to do that well going forward. I'm almost always of the mindset of I'm in it until I'm not. Right. Like I'm one of those teams that will be happy to scrap and fight and be right in the middle and get that 6th spot in the playoffs and win it all. You know what I mean? Like
Oh,
I'm one of those teams that I don't give up until you tell me it's over. You know what I mean? Like it'll be I'll be January. I'll be like making trades. Like I'm still in this. Like, dude, the season ended 3 weeks ago. What are you doing? I'm like, I still have a chance. I don't give up. And I'm right there with you. Like there's nothing better than a championship. There's nothing better than points on the board. So I'm almost always, if I'm in a tie, if I'm in the middle, I'm deciding to kind of go all in. Let's see what trades I can pull off and kind of go from there and just see what the next couple weeks hold. But Scott, as someone who plays portfolio and has a lot of teams, I mean, what do you do when you're in the middle? Is it the same kind of mentality?
Okay, so
story time?
The
with
main
Scott.
thing
There
is if you're gonna rebuild, you got to do it sooner than later, right? Rebuild, retool, whatever you want to call it. If you're the first one to it, typically you're going to have a bit of an advantage. So it's already too late for that because in any given 12-team league, there's probably already, a team that's decided to go that way. And then there's also another couple of teams that were already doing that, whether it's from the off season or the previous season. So now you start to get into the haves and have-nots and how many teams do you have to be able to trade assets to, right? So you kind of have to analyze your league individually and say, okay, are there teams that are heading down the rebuilding path that have players that can help me now? If I'm real close to the top and I want to put myself over the edge, I'm fine with trading for the Melvin Gordons and players like that. But to me, there's no value beyond this year for them. So if I'm a middling team, I don't want to give up youth or assets for a Melvin Gordon type player, right? Because now I could be setting myself back twice. If I don't win it this year and then I have nothing next year, now I'm just losing value. So what I've noticed is there's typically 2 really good times to make a decision of which direction you're going to go and how to get there. And it's just based on my experience. However, our good friend Jordan McNamara, Analytics of Dynasty, he just came out with the Analytics of Dynasty rebuilding guide. Okay. And if you play in a lot of leagues or you play in big money leagues, spend the $20 and get it, because he has the data that backs up exactly what I'm saying right now. So based on case studies and hundreds of leagues and all that, it will tell you the weeks to focus on, when you should be looking at your record, things like that. And there's all sorts of tools and tactics and strategies in there. So it's analyticsofdynasty.com. I highly recommend that guide. I've not gotten all the way through it yet, but just where I'm at and then looking at my experience, it's perfect. It's literally the stats to back up like what I'm saying. So I mean, it couldn't have worked out any better. So definitely go support Jordan and get that. It's well worth it. But these are the couple weeks where I would have said last week would have been one of those where I'm making some decisions on teams, but because of how crazy it was, I put it off a little bit. But over the next 2 weeks, and it also depends where your trade deadlines are, right? So some might be around Thanksgiving, some might be a little later. Some leagues don't have trade deadlines. So you have to factor that into. But really look at your individual league. You're going to have to spend some time going through rosters, look at the worst teams, look at the best teams. And I'm saying by points, go by points, not necessarily record. Or if you see a trend, somebody's lost a couple in a row, maybe they're a little dejected, something like that. Just like any other time you're going to find a trade. But in this case, you're going to be targeting specific things. Now, I would just highly caution that you are far better off just ending up in the middle than giving away young assets or future picks for guys that are unlikely to have value past this year. Because, I mean, look at it pretty much every year you can look back. But last year, if you had a top 6 pick, okay. Oh, I have the 106. Oh, I'm so sad. I ended up with Javonte Williams or Jamar Chase or Trey Lance. Like, yo, that's terrible, right? I'm stoked with any of those guys. And honestly, it's easier sometimes because the decision's made for you, right? So, I know it doesn't work out like that every year, but in my experience, you're far better off going forward into the future, ending up in the middle than moving young assets for guys that are unlikely to have value past this year. So you just really have to analyze that.
I would also say your first round pick becomes way more valuable the closer you get to your draft.
For sure.
Because people get excited to draft. So if
Yep.
you aren't able to sell it now-ish, I think that's what you're saying basically, then hold and then if you do want to sell right before the draft, do it, because you'll get gangbusters because people are so excited to get their 1-1 or whatever, right? Whereas now it's not as exciting. It's not as shiny of a toy that you can take advantage of. So yeah, I mean, listen, like we're gonna, I don't want to bear the lead here, but that's not the right term that I'm even looking for right now. But the point is that that's why I'm going, like, if you're going to do it, like, go for like a Dalvin Cook, go for a big time dude. Don't just go for like Miles Sanders. Like the fact that, you have no idea if this dude's even going to be playing football next year. I know it sounds crazy, but literally look at his game log and then say, maybe that's a reality. So yeah, like I agree. I mean, I think that this is also making sense. Like, really go for the gold, because sometimes also people are trade junkies and it's not even that great a trade, but they're like, I want to trade. So, okay.
Yeah,
that's right.
I'm guilty of that.
We live for those people.
Yeah. Well, I think also though, what you're saying too, Scott, is don't give up value just to do something, like just to make a move, right? Like make sure it's still good value. And
seriously,
I think too, something that I tell people, which may surprise them, is that like I tend to look at a calculator for a lot of my trades, not to say yes or no, but just to kind of check the pulse on where things are, right? Just to be like, am I getting emotional? Am I biased in this? Am I looking at this like I really want this player, but could I get them plus an OBJ throw in? You know what I mean? Like, am I really giving up value here? And it's not because I don't know value. It's more of my values are different than the calculator, whatever calculator. And that calculator value is different than my trade partner. You know what I mean? Like, no, there is no one value in any of this. I like to use it as like a level set, just to be like, hey, am I missing something? Is there something I'm not, like Brandon Ayuk is still worth a lot of stuff in some calculators. I have no value for him, right? But it's like, maybe somebody else still does. And it kind of reminds me like, wait a minute, there are still trades out there where people like him. I shouldn't give him away for a third. You know what I mean? Like I'm done with the guy, but I could probably get a second for him, or get more than that. And so like that's where I use that stuff as a tool, not as a decider, but like as a tool in my toolbox to be like, all right, what am I doing? The other thing that I wanted to hit on, and I think you're kind of saying this, for me, if I'm rebuilding or if I'm just not sure what to do, I almost always start at the bye weeks. Because if you've got somebody on a bye in your league that is going for it and they need a QB and they're going to be desperate to get one win, I can send them a Jared Goff. I can send them a Taylor Heineke. I can send them a Tyrod Taylor. Like, some of these guys that have absolutely zero or little value in Superflex, and I can get back more, and I can take a player like a George Kittle or something, like maybe not 1-for-1, but like I can target a player who's injured that they may be kind of done with, right? I could trade, let's say I trade like a Ricky Seals-Jones and a Chase Edmonds and Jared Goff for George Kittle. Something like that, where it's like, I'll take that injured guy off your roster. You're going to get points, which is what we were just talking about. That's what you should go for. But if I'm rebuilding, the bye weeks are when I start really zooming in and looking at the league and being like, going through each team's lineup on Sunday, even like wait until the games start and be like, all right, what teams are really weak and where? You know what I mean? Like this guy's only got 2 QBs and one of them's on a bye next week. I might have a chance. You know what I mean? Like that's when I start to strike. And I think that's where, again, I'm all for going all in. But if you're at the bottom of the standings or the bottom of the scoring, it doesn't matter. You could try to get a guy like Melvin Gordon, but what's that doing for you, right? If you're in the middle and you really don't know what to do, and you're really just kind of like, I've got a very low chance of winning, or I don't feel like I can pull this off. I think tanking is the wrong word for it. It's like a productive struggle. It's like, I want to go get more assets. I want to earn more value. I want to find something that's more stable. And I always say, and it kind of goes back to the portfolio logic, players are like stocks, picks are like cash, right? I would rather put money in my checking account than risk it right now. Put it in my checking account. It'll be safe, accruing 1% every month. It just adds a little bit to but I'm not risking it because I don't want to risk it right now. I don't need to risk it. I need to just accrue something and get a base. And then come draft time, come rookie draft, trade those picks back for stock. And like Brandon was saying, don't pick every pick. My God, I actually was on a Twitter thread today. Scott Connor was talking about this, who's another portfolio player. He's like, you don't have to make all your picks. Like, you can accrue picks and then from January to March, trade them all away for assets, because that's when people want picks. And they're willing to give away guys like DJ Moore for a first round pick. And you're like, I would gladly take DJ Moore over the 107. Like, any day of the week, right? But the guy's like, you know what? I'm just done with DJ Moore and I don't have any picks. I really want to pick. And so the more picks you get, the more chance you have of making a trade like that, not to make the pick. So I feel like all of that kind of comes into play. So again, if you're in the middle and you're not sure what to do, take a look at your standings, take a look at the other teams, do some evaluation. It's definitely worth the time. And in Dynasty, again, we don't know what next year holds. We don't know if we're going to be in this league. That's a terrific way to put it. But I always try to win. And I think sometimes the best way to win is not to play. Right? Like, let's just take myself out of the game this year, right? A little War Games reference for those of us in the millennial generation. But like, sometimes the winning move is to just sit back and go, all right, I'll collect my stuff and we'll get it figured out. It was a movie from the 80s, Scott. It's fine.
Yeah.
All that aside, I think that kind of covers it. I think we hit on it. But does anybody else have anything of that same tone before we go into the Find Me a Pick?
I was just gonna say, I want to clarify. Like, to me, what I like about Melvin Gordon is he should be free. Okay, so like, that's the thing. Like,
Agreed.
I target people for free. Like, I'm like,
Agreed.
I can get these people for free to score me points. But if you're asking me to pay for him, the answer is no.
Right.
And I think that's kind of what you're saying. It's like,
point,
there's no point in me giving up a first to get Melvin Gordon plus 4 other players or something that are all just middling. That doesn't make any sense. But if I can get Dalvin Cook with someone just throwing in a Melvin Gordon.
Right.
Okay,
Or
well, now we're having a
third,
conversation.
If
Yeah,
you've
like,
got
now
a lot of picks, just trade a little guy for a Melvin Gordon. I agree with you 100%.
I want a little T.Y. Hilton in my life. I want these dudes that have nothing, but I want them thrown in with the dude I'm actually targeting.
Yeah, that's not your target.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
But they should be free. And that's what I love about them. They should be my free dudes. And
It's
like your OBJ.
Like a
Sadly,
bruised fruit at the grocery store, right?
Right.
Like, I need to get some fruit in my life, but I'd rather take the free bruised pineapple. You know what I mean? Like, give me the one you're going to throw away. That's much cheaper for me, and it still counts as fruit, so I'm good, right? I don't care what it looks like. You know what I mean? Like,
I
that's
don't
what
care. Yeah, like when things get thrown in and they have some value, you're like, I feel so lucky, right? But if I have to pay for it, I'm pissed. Even if I liked it the same, right?
Exactly.
So I agree with you 100%.
All about value. All about value. Yep, you're exactly
And
right.
then,
it's always about the cost.
On the other side, if you're rebuilding, retooling, whatever, target injured players.
For sure.
Even if you're not fans of them. For example, I traded away all my Dobbins before the season. I had 0 shares of Dobbins left before week 1. Now I think I'm up to 3 or 4 because, again, I don't love him, but guess what's going to happen next year when camp rolls around and they're like, oh man, he's 10 months out from ACL surgery and he looks so good and he's cutting and and everybody's going to get excited again, and you could trade him for whatever you want. So even if you don't like the player, don't play, he doesn't, oh, I don't want running backs right now, I'm rebuilding. I get it. That's fine. But injured players, target those guys because you're going to be able to trade them in the future. Additionally, especially if your league goes by potential points for the draft picks for the non-playoff teams, that guy's not scoring you any points.
Yep.
So that's going to improve your pick as well. And so even you might not be able to get up to 1 or 2, but if you can move up to, from 7 to 3 or 4, I mean, that can sometimes be the difference because we never really know where the cutoff's going to be from that, elite talent. And you may be able to trade back or do some other things once we get closer to that point. So target injured players.
No, and I think too, you're hitting something there that I don't think we talk about enough is know your settings, right? Like know what your league is. Like when is your
Yep.
trade deadline? Is your trade deadline week 12 or did it move back to week 13 because we added a week, or is there no trade deadline? Because I think sometimes people just assume it's the same across every league, that there's like a standard. No, it's not. That's not true.
No, it isn't.
Some players, and you were just saying like potential points, some players that play fantasy don't even know what that is, right? Where it's like, listen, it's your potential points. Like how many points did your team get through the year, including your bench? Or like a starting best ball lineup would have scored X amount of points. That's where it's like, well, I benched the guy, so I'm tanking. Nope, doesn't matter. We're potential points. So that kind of takes that out of it.
And don't do that, please.
Well,
start your best lineup.
Agreed. I'm just saying there are sometimes people try to get cute, and that's why potential points exist, because it's like, no, that's we're not doing that here. So you might as well start your best lineup. But that's kind of what I mean. If you don't know that that's a case, then you're hurting yourself. Might as well trade for a Dobbins because he's getting you a 0. There's no doubt that Dobbins will score 0 points this year. Not a question. And sometimes that's a good thing. I agree entirely. So let's move into the find me a trade. This one, I think this was an interesting one. I think we got some interesting options here, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. So this was submitted by Andy Mabry at Star Chucker on Twitter, which I think is a terrific Twitter name, Star Chucker, like he's throwing stars. It's just terrific. It's a sleeper league. The league is named Neutral Zone. I'll bring it up here on the sharing the screen for a second. We'll kind of run through the team. His name is King of the Corgis, which again, I think this is so creative. I like it. But he is 4-3. So he's right where we were talking about in that middle of the pack. And, like, is this a team that we think can make the jump? Is it something we can see happening? Is it something that I guess maybe should he rebuild or something like that? I think let me pull it up here. So this is a start 8. It's a 1 QB league. I think you can see it there on the screen. 1 QB, 2 running backs, 2 receivers, a tight end, and 2 flex. And it's kind of run of the mill. I mean, it doesn't seem like there's 12 teams and all of that jazz. He's got 17 bench players, 8 IR, and 5 taxi. Now, 8 IR seems like a lot. But during this COVID year, we saw a lot of leagues up the IR slots just because of the chaos and the randomness. So I'm not sure if it's always 8 IR or maybe there were other bench spots and they switched. I don't know. But I like when a start 8 has 8 IR. It's like, okay, your entire starting lineup can be on IR. Interesting. But anyway, let's kind of run through the league. So the starters on this, we've got Dak Prescott at QB, DeAndre Swift, Najee Harris as the starting running backs, DK Metcalf, DJ Moore as the receivers, TJ Hawkinson. Our boy Rocky loves him some Hawkinson, so that's always good. Darrell Williams and Devonta Smith round out his flex spots. Now, I think that's a pretty solid starting core. I don't hate any of that. I think that the depth is kind of where maybe it takes a different turn. But he's got Aaron Rodgers, Taylor Heineke, and Geno Smith on his bench. Running backs, we got Divine Ozigbo, Savon Ahmed, Ty Johnson, Ty Montgomery, Devonta Freeman, Anthony McFarland, Elijah McGuire, Jamar Jefferson. None of those guys are really flex worthy, in my opinion. Maybe Ahmed if we get lucky. So
I'm going to confess something. I sent a message to Andrew being like, I'm sorry, I don't think I understand this. Why does he have 500 running backs that make no sense? And then these amazing wide receivers. And I got very confused. I was like, I think I'm not reading it correctly. And he was like, no, I think you are. Said, okay.
That's exactly what you're seeing. And I think, well, your receiver, I mean, again, we saw the receivers, right?
They're great.
He's starting Devonta Smith, DK Metcalf, and DJ Moore. That's pretty solid. But on the bench, he's got Corey Davis, Chase Claypool, T. Higgins. I mean, that's 3 solid receivers on your bench. But that's it. Exactly. That's it. There are no other receivers on this team. Tight end after Hawkinson, he's got Troutman, Uzama, and Conklin. And then if you scroll even further, we've got a lot in IR, of course. We've got O'Shaughnessy, Barber, Gallup, Hurd, Edwards-Helaire, so there's another running back there. Bowden, who I think is a free agent technically. Jake Funk, who's not doing anything. And then taxi, we've got Trey McKitty, Elijah Moore, which again, I think I might leave that guy in taxi given those receiver core. And then a couple of other scrubs here, right? And then looking further, picks-wise, he's got 2 22 firsts, neither of which are his, which I think is interesting to note. He's got a second and a third, and then 3 23 firsts, one of which is his. So he's got a pretty good core and a lot of future assets. So I think this is one of those teams where you're 4-3, and it's like, man, how the heck are you 4-3? Like, that doesn't really make sense to me. Like, how did this happen? And I'm trying to go in here to the scores, and you can kind of see King of the Corgis here. 777 is right in the middle of the pack scoring wise. It's top half, right? He's 5th place in the league. And so it's like, this guy is in the middle, but he's exactly what we were talking about earlier, Brandon. He's 5th, but he's not 5th. Like he's got a lot of potential. So I guess let's start with you, Scott. What was your trade? What were you thinking about for a trade on this one, and kind of give us your thoughts there.
All right. So kind of what we were talking about before, where you take this team and you see a lot of youth and talent and assets with all the draft picks. So if he wants to make a run, that's fine, but let's not give up, all this youth, and let's not waste this potential here. Let's not give up the value. Now in a start 8 league, and I was very confused for quite a while as to, especially because I knew Rodgers was playing tonight, and I was like, why isn't Rodgers in his lineup? I don't know what's going on here. And as you can tell, I'm not great at reading notes, so I didn't realize it was a 1 quarterback league.
Yeah.
And so I was like, what is happening? I don't get this. But anyway, so what stood out to me immediately was like, I liked his initial, like his core of the running backs, receivers, but then the flex kind of was like, I was like, I don't. The 2 flex spots were weak in my opinion. And then I started looking down the rest of the roster there. Now with Swift and Harris, I love having those 2 young running backs, but with a half PPR, you're losing a little bit of value because those guys are bringing the volume in the passing game. So in general, not within the league necessarily, but in general, those guys are gonna they're gonna score a lot of points from catching the ball, right? So like in smaller leagues, when you have smaller leagues or when you have less starting positions, like most of my leagues are start 10 or 11. So a start 8 is very small, and then the large bench size. Now I like that setup, but what it means is anytime you have a smaller league or smaller starters, you want more studs. And obviously, oh yeah, Scott, no kidding. You want more studs on your team? Like, yeah, obviously. No, I get it. Regardless of your settings, you want studs. But in this case, I would be trying to package depth and try to get the best possible players, not just for this year, but going forward too. So if you can find a trade that's going to help you in both. Now, initially, looking at some of the teams near the bottom in points are also the teams at the bottom of the standings in this league. So that worked out nicely. Mixon was a guy that I wanted to target there because I believe in half PPR, I tend to go heavier with running backs when I want to compete. I don't know that that's necessarily right, but that's typically what I do. However, I didn't like anything that I came up with there. I knew I'd have to give up picks and everything. And Mixon, I don't know. I didn't really feel like this particular roster that Mixon would be a great fit for it. Because I think he could win this year if he stays healthy and he's getting the volume and all that. But what I don't like is the uncertainty going forward. So I wanted to target I wanted to find a stud. And the crazy thing to me is that AJ Brown is like, he's still, I mean, he's AJ Brown, but people are like, oh, he's hurt and the offense isn't on. Derrick Henry just runs the ball. Like, yeah, okay. How's that any different than the last few years? Like, that's just, so AJ Brown to me right now seems like a buy anywhere you can get. Now he had a decent week last week, and if you watched the game, you saw he looked really good and is still AJ Brown. But that's initially what I saw was on IR was CEH, and especially in a half PPR, I want to get out of that situation. So for me, I packaged CEH and Claypool to go to team zone 6 for AJ Brown. Now, I actually don't want to give up Claypool in a half PPR, so maybe you go a different direction. Maybe Higgins, who's, in my opinion, another buy right now because of what Chase is doing. Give me all the Higgins because I think he's only 10 receptions behind him. He just doesn't have the big splash plays and all that, but that's fine. They're kind of fading Boyd from the offense anyway. So if you could give up Higgins instead of Claypool, that would be fine too. But basically packaging one of those running backs and getting yourself another stud receiver to plug in that lineup. It's nice to have the depth, and it's going to get you through the bye weeks and the injuries and all that, no doubt. But adding AJ Brown to that lineup, I think just it gives you one more positional advantage over your opponent.
Well, I love the idea of packaging to get a stud. You put it perfectly. When you start 8, it's kind of like you need to have the best 8 possible in your starting lineup. And you don't want to have decisions every week. Do I start Claypool or Higgins or Devonta Smith? Like, I'd much rather have A.J. Brown than any of those guys. So it's like, take 2 from your bench to get a starter. I love that logic. Yeah. I mean, Brandon, what do you think about that? Is A.J. Brown something you're enjoying in this type of format here?
Yeah, I am. I think that it's interesting because I felt 2 different ways about this. I thought to myself, why aren't there more wide receivers here? And my first tip actually has nothing to do with the trade, but just there's got to be better wide receivers than the running backs you got there. You don't need that many running backs that you will never start. So I would just go try to find wide receivers on waivers, first of all. Like, even with that size of roster, literally none of them are startable. So they all got to go. Well, you got to start rotating, I should say. I mean, obviously It's not going to be all at once, right? Because waivers on Dynasty leagues is not a thing, but you can get little pieces here, little pieces there. And then I thought the same thing. When was the last time either of you played in an 8 or 10 person league?
Last year I did a 10. Yeah.
I don't have anything lower than 12.
Yeah. So everyone poo-poos them. And I understand that.
It's whatever.
But it's actually very tough because
Yeah.
all of the teams are good. And I think that that's exactly why we're looking. It's
There's
kind of
more
what
luck.
you're saying here too, about these 8 players. Like my Dynasty League, we start 12. So literally, does he breathe is a good enough thing to start in some weeks, right? Whereas this one, they really need to be good. And so where we agree is that there needs to be a stud that goes in there, whether it's a running back or a wide receiver, it needs to be a stud, because otherwise you're not going to move the needle at all in these leagues where you start less or you're in a smaller league. That's just in general, you have to go massive stud. You cannot, there's no, frankly, Chase Claypool isn't going to move the needle. Right. This is not a good enough player right now for this team. So we agree on that. It's just, I probably would go running back because in my opinion, even though he has 50 of them, none of them are startable. So if he has one injury to those 2 studs, he's got a massive problem. And even when CEH comes back, you're not going to, he's tough to start too, right? With any confidence, right? It's boom or bust, and it's going to be tough. And then is Kansas City going to go back there? Also, Kansas City's struggling. Right. So it's a different team even now. I'm not quite sure you can play him. I agree. If you're going to move anyone, he's the guy. But either way, it has to be a stud. So if it's A.J. Brown, great. If it's another stud at the running back position, fine. But this is a situation like if you're an 8 or 10 team league, it is stud only. There are no scrubs in your starter. You cannot afford that. So I agree with that.
Well, just to clarify, you mean you're starting 8 players, not that there are 8 teams in the league. Right? Like
yeah, but I'm saying it's the same technique.
Either way.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm just making sure that you're clear. Like this, I get what your logic is. Yep. When you're only starting that few of many.
Yeah. And the problem is like people poo-poo these things, but honestly, it's a different mentality. This is actually the same thing that actually I was kind of known for like my whole career, but that you said earlier, and I was like, know your settings, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is a perfect example of that. Since you only start 8, you have to change the way that you're thinking about this. And I think that's it's all very similar to me, because that's why he's middling.
You need more ceiling than floor when you start less. Yes,
agreed. And I guess Brandon, what was your trade? Because yours is kind of in that same vein, right? Like to consolidate and to kind of get a stud. What was your trade?
Yeah, I thought I would move a first to get a Dalvin Cook type, and then I would pair that with Chase Claypool, and then I would get like a T.Y. Hilton Osborne, and it was from let me look at the name of the dude.
Ryan Balling, which is a terrific balling. Hopefully it's
yeah. And actually his team has a lot of pieces. And interestingly enough, they're in a position, the Ryan Balling team, where they should be out of it, especially with Hunt out. But they may be thinking that they're still in it. So this is also a good way for you to determine how this person feels. Their team is very interesting. I bet their team, they're surprised they're losing that much. But there's a lot of pieces here. But the Hilton, Osborne, Crowder, whatever, those are people that you can get thrown in for free, like I said. But I think you do need to have a little more wide receiver depth. If you give one away, you need to get one back. because you only have 2 dudes really, right?
Well, yeah,
Or is
and
it 3? Is it 3 on the bench?
three
I
in the
can't-
starting and 3 on the bench, and it's weird because all the receivers are startable or flexible.
Yeah, they're
But
all
like
excellent.
you've only got
Yes.
really 3 running backs. If you count Darrell Williams while CEH is out, you really only got 3 running backs. It's odd because again, it's a different setup than I usually build, but not a bad thing. It's just how some of these teams go. But to have what ends up being like 12 running backs and only 3 startable, that's where I'm like, okay, well that's the weak spot. Yes, you have quantity, but you don't have quality. And I think I love the idea of trading for someone like a Dalvin Cook, like someone who's on a 2-5 team like the one there, and they had some injuries. They've got David Montgomery and Kareem Hunt, like they've got Marquise Brown. They've got some good young talent to build around. And Cook might be on one of his last legs. That guy, I could see if I was 2-5 and I had that team that you're talking about, I could see moving Cook for a first in Claypool. Like Claypool's a young asset. I'm getting younger. You can have Cook, right? And then throwing in a Crowder or a Hilton, I'm not needing those guys anyway. So I think that's a fine trade, and it gives you a stud who I would consider Cook your best running back then. Like that is now your RB1. That's a terrific trade. Yes, you're giving away a first and you're giving away Chase Claypool, but you need a stud, and that's what you're getting. I love that trade.
Yeah. And the thing is too is that this person may be in the mentality of Dalvin Cook also keeps getting hurt, right?
Yep.
So they're thinking, okay, well maybe this is my moment.
Let me off this
I
ride.
can get this.
Yeah.
And I got that young asset with Chase Claypool. I believe in him. And there's a little bit of a Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, debate going on. So you don't know what side this person's on. And then he can decide, you know what, maybe I am in rebuild, and they can go that direction. Again, they have a lot of good pieces there. I'm interested in this team. They want to move one way or the other right now. So that's
that
what
2-5 team is a terrific target. You're exactly right, because it's like they're not bad, but they might be wanting to just get out of it and be like, you know what, this isn't my year. Let me turn it around. I like that.
And they're probably still participating.
Yeah.
Sometimes these like 1 win or 0 win teams are really just chill, and they're kind of like, and then they're not really excited about trades either.
Yeah.
The 2-5 guys, like,
yeah. Well, so my team, my trade was actually with one of those 1-6, and it was for Mixon, which is what you were kind of poo-pooing a little bit before, Scott. But like my logic was send the 103. He's got what he predicts to be the 101 and 103. And again, if you're in the middle and neither of those picks are his, so it's like it doesn't matter what your team does. But that 103 is not going to be this guy's pick. And so I don't want to give him his pick back, because I feel like I kind of want that team to be bad, and I want to hold that pick. And if I'm taking a player off of it for the pick, I'd rather have the pick and let him not have the player. It's kind of a win-win, right? So whichever pick wasn't his, whichever one, the other pick, sending it for something like Mixon and Ertz, like Ertz as a throw-in. You've got Hawkinson, you've got Troutman, you've got some potential guys on your bench for tight end. I think Ertz could be a flex here and there as buys and injuries pile up. But then you add Mixon, who I think really changes the dynamic of this team. And I mean, again, it's not a Dalvin Cook. It's not quite that pretty. So that's a better trade than what I came up with. But I think Mixon is somebody that you can still go out there and get for a single first. And this next year's running back class is not that stellar. And I think if you've got 2 picks, and if it was me and I had 2 picks in the early, like first half of the draft, I'm probably not taking a running back with one of those unless there's a crazy difference or some crazy landing spot, which we never know. I mean, again, we're talking about this at the end of October. We don't know what the draft is going to be yet, but I'm looking at it like I would much rather have a running back like Mixon on my team than a rookie receiver-ish. I'm already going to get a rookie receiver. Give me Mixon. I think he's still got a couple years left. This team is built to win for a couple years. So I'm looking at it like, give me the Mixon, give me the known running back points, give me some flexibility as I head into the playoffs, because I don't think you're going to get it done with the team you have now. You're 2 wide receiver quality and running back quantity. You kind of need to level that out a little. And I think too is once you make that trade, you get 2 players and you can drop 2 of your running backs for those 2 guys. Like you kind of level it out a little more. Maybe even drop one of your other tight ends and get another receiver. I mean, I was looking like James Washington is on waivers. I might rather have him than Divino Zigbo. You know what I mean? Like there's some other guys that are on waivers. I was just looking at it a second ago. It's like you got DeMarcus Robinson. Sometimes he gets a touchdown, could be a flash in the pan. You've got Kenny Stills for New Orleans. Who knows? You got Chris Conley, Rashard Higgins. Like some of those guys, receivers, I would rather have a lot of those players than some of these running backs on your team. Like Elijah McGuire, Anthony McFarland, those guys do nothing for me. Like get rid of those guys. And Jamar Jefferson, I don't mind holding on to that kind of as a handcuff, but just I think he might have some potential. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, we're all on the same page. Let's try to level up. Let's get to a better running back or a better receiver and try to stud this team out. And I do think at 3-4, 4-3, you're not out of it with this team, right? You've got some potential to turn it around. So I think those are some terrific ideas. I think, is there anything else you guys want to talk about related to this team before we kind of wrap up for the evening?
Well, I think that Scott made a good point where, like, so I'm going to link it to this dude. This man clearly likes to trade, right? So he's first starting even his own. This is not the end of the road for your first picks. This isn't whatever. Let's say you can't, even with one of these studs, it's still not happening. Okay, trade one away and get another first. Like, who cares?
Exactly.
At this point, like, just try, because clearly you're a mover and a shaker. So I'm not worried
Great
about
point.
you not getting a first round pick at some point if you need it. But if you win, then you used it the way you should. And so, you know, I know my strength. I am a much better, I'm not as good at rookie drafts as I want to be. I'm just not. I seem to always pick someone that disappoints. And I'm just going to put out there.
Yeah.
Corey Davis. Oh my gosh. You know, I mean, there's just some moments that I just was like, oh my gosh, what did I do?
Well, you didn't predict the 7th-year breakout or whatever it is. Yeah.
And also it was just so painful. It was so painful.
You were not alone in that. Yeah.
You know, and that's okay. You know, you just got to know your strengths, and you are a good trader person that we're talking to, because like I'm looking down the whole thing. This is good stuff. So yeah, I guess I feel, you know, also we don't mean to poo-poo that you only start 8 starters either, just to clarify.
Oh, yeah,
it's
not
just
at
that
all.
it's a totally different concept than probably a lot of the dynasty content you're absorbing right now, because a lot of leagues are starting way more players.
9, 10, 11, 13. I'm in one that starts 13, which is just a beast. I mean, it's like every week you're scraping
12.
the barrel.
Yeah. You know, and you're like, oh, Jeremy McNichols, is that what I'm talking about now? And
Boston
so,
Scott
like,
off of waivers into lineup. Yep, exactly.
Yeah. Boston Scott on waivers. Oh my gosh, I'm jealous. You know, it's like, yeah. So I think it just is a different concept. So I don't want to say do absorb this dynasty content, but some of the dynasty content I wouldn't overly absorb, because your league is really specific. So I don't know. And Scott, you're like a portfolio dude, so you probably have more of these than I can, you know, shake a stick at. But a lot of the things that I read in dynasty, and maybe it's just because I'm in larger leagues, are geared to larger leagues. Is that true?
Yes.
Larger lineups, I should say,
like
because there's a lot of bench
size, right? Yeah, where you have 10 starters and it's a 12-team league, and you know you're kind of there. Even I've seen a lot of articles in Dynasty that talk about, you know, 3 or 4 or 5 flexes and things like that. He's only got 2 flex. You know, 2 receiver, 2 running back, 2 flex. I mean, that you're really, that's different than most leagues, and that's not a bad thing at all. I think that a lot of times the differences are what makes the league fun. I joined a lot of leagues this year and last year even because they were different. That was the whole point. Like, what's different about this league? Oh, it starts 3 running backs, 3 receivers, 3 flex, 2 tight end. I'm in. You know, like that's something I've never done before. Like, it's crazy and it's painful, but at the same time, it makes it fun, like to stretch your mind a little and to kind of get into this. I've actually thought about doing something where it's like start 6. You know what I mean? With like 35-person teams, but you only start 6, where like the decisions are the important part. Because I hate that part. Like, that's where I need to get better, and that's where I want to grow, right? So that's where I'm thinking next. Like, maybe I do something like that. But yeah, I think we've covered it. I think Andy's got a lot of good options. I think even if nothing else, he's got some bones for some good trades. I would love to hear what you think of that, Andy. Hit us up on Twitter at Dynasty Junkies. Let us know if you can pull off any of these trades. I don't think any of these have to be done. I don't think you're in a bad spot. I think you're okay with where you are, but hopefully you got some good advice from us there and can take that and apply it. I think that's pretty much going to wrap us up for this episode. So, Brandon, what are you up to lately? I know you got a bunch of stuff going on with The Athletic, but where can people find you if they want to kind of check out your content?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Brandon Her FFB, which I used to have a podcast and a SiriusXM radio show with my sisters called Her Fantasy Football. So that's where that comes from. And we actually have a family league that's a 10-person league. It's one of my harder leagues because everyone's good, and obviously they're very good at fantasy football. So it's really tough, and I have to literally like change my brain. So that's kind of why I'm so passionate about it. But yeah, so but you can check me out there, and I am on Wednesdays. The Athletic has different people doing different days. So on Wednesdays, I do the Athletic show, the fantasy football podcast with Nando DeFino and Chris Vaccaro, which is fun because Chris does a lot of high stakes leagues, and it's very specific.
Yeah.
And I'm a little bit more like granule, all leagues type thing.
Casual or normal, whatever you want to call it. Yeah.
Yeah. Or just not specific to the group of people. I think sometimes you can get in a mentality with a group of people that all is the same, but it's really good though, because they actually can inform you so you can be ahead of the game. So it's
That's
really,
true.
really good. And then Nando's just great and kind of like the godfather, one of the content godfathers of the entire fantasy industry. So someone everyone should know.
No,
And then I do the mailbag.
Yeah.
I do the mailbag for the Athletic, and I do like 20 questions. I mean, I like there are comments and then they're like, no one does mailbags like this. This is nuts. And that's what I do. And it is so fun because people ask ridiculous questions and everyone always at the bottom is like, oh my gosh, no one would ever do that trade. And then sure enough, someone shows up in the comments and like, yep, someone did that trade. So that's why I'm also passionate about just try it. See what they'll do. You know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's what I'm doing. I'm dipping my toe back in. I took 2 seasons off, and it's been really fun. And so this is only my second guest appearance on a podcast, I believe, this year, because I'm really trying to lay it down. But I just want to say thank you so much for having me. It's been really fun, and I appreciate it. And Dynasty adds such a good, fun layer to fantasy sports in general, and I'm really glad when people target that genre because it is a genre. It's a completely different force, and I learn from people like you guys all the time. So thank you.
No, we really appreciate you having the time, I guess, giving us your time. I know your time is precious. You've got the baby and everything. So we really appreciate you coming on and jumping on here.
I do, but I'm also lame now. Like a lot of people don't know who I am. It's really interesting. Like the whole space has changed in just 2 years. So I show up on Twitter and there's all these people that are just like, yakking. And then and
that's
like
the whole thing.
And everyone's listening to them. And I'm like, who is this person? I don't know who this is. And guess what? They don't know who I am either. And who cares? You know, and that's fine, you know. But it's interesting. I'm like, maybe no one wants me on their show anymore. I don't know.
Oh, no, that's not it.
But it's also kind of fun to like lay low.
That's true.
I kind of feel like a sleuth. You know,
like a spy underneath the radar.
Yeah. There we go. Yeah.
Stealth.
Oh, what's going on? So, but I just really appreciate you both, and thank you so much. And cheers to everyone doing Dynasty, guys. Week 8.
Oh yeah, let's go get those titles, right? That's what this is all about. So really, again, thank you so much for coming on, Brandon. It was a great conversation. I'm really glad we could get you. Find the rest of us. Obviously, I mentioned the Dynasty Junkies at Dynasty Junkies on Twitter. Send us DMs if you got questions. If you want to talk about trades, tag us in polls. We're always a fan of that. We always like to retweet that stuff. Obviously, you can find me on Twitter at Andrew Hall FF. You can find Scott at Scott_Sidlow. Our third host, Rocky Petrella at Dynasty FF Addict. He's a busy man. He's on about every other podcast in Dynasty there is. So you've probably heard him 30 times already this week. But he's off tonight, but he'll be back next week. We got another great guest lined up. But subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. We like any of those reviews, any of those comments. If you got feedback for us, we're always here for it. And with all that aside, I mean, again, great episode. But Scott, take us out of here.
Shout out to Andy Mabry for submitting the Find Me a Trade. Good luck with that, my brother. Shout out to Zach Reed in the comments. We see you, man. You're the best. Love you, dude. To one of my all-time favorites, Brandon Marianne Lee. Amazing. Awesome to have you here. Like I said, I think it's been like a decade I've been listening to you. So that's crazy, right? That's awesome. So for Brandon, for my man Andrew Hall, I'm Scott Sidlow. Junkies out.